Good afternoon. I'm Joe Donlin with breaking news on the Bears and the team's search for a new stadium. In a statement released today, the team announced its board of directors has voted to advance stadium developments in Hammond, Indiana. This comes, of course, after the Illinois legislature failed to put together a bill that would have ultimately kept them in Illinois. Let's bring in Kevin Fishbain right now, senior writer for The Atlantic, a Northwestern grad as well. He covers the Bears. And Kevin, I saw you tweeted just a little bit ago, I see no shovels in the ground, so until then, round and round we go. So welcome in, thanks for the time. What does this vote mean?
Well, I think it is important that the board of directors got together and the Bears put out this statement, because if you think back to as far as back as this goes, which is 2021, when the Bears first purchased the land in Arlington Park, we haven't heard from the board of directors. We haven't heard of a vote taking place, even as this moves back to Chicago, then back to Arlington Heights, and then Hammond comes into the picture. So it's notable for them to go ahead and take the time to bring the board together to vote on this, to put out this statement. It absolutely means something. What that something is, I'm just not ready to say until I see a ribbon cutting, a shovel in the ground, a couple hard hats on, a few McCaskies, and them announcing that they're actually going to start building somewhere. Because as you just read in that statement, there is no exact site determined yet for Hammond. There's still a lot that needs to be done before they could break ground there. And as I'm sure you've seen from a lot of the statements from Illinois politicians today, they believe the door is still open for the Bears to still remain in the state.
Yeah, well, it feels a little bit like a negotiating ploy. I mean, sort of thumbing their nose at the Illinois legislature and saying, oh yeah, watch this.
It probably is a little bit of that. I mean, I think the Bears are very, they're not seeing this as leverage, and they're certainly publicly, they want to make it very clear that this is not an organization that is going to throw around a lot of money at consultants and architects and surveyors and lobbyists for nothing. And they've already had to spend a lot of that money, and it's gone for naught. If you think about the entire 1 year spent to look into building on downtown Chicago, which was something that really was always going to be an underdog situation for the Bears. So for them to go ahead and say this, I think they mean it. I think they are very committed to the possibility of Indiana. With that said, I firmly believe it's not their first choice. Yeah. Otherwise, they would have purchased this land or looked into this land a long time ago. Their first choice has been Arlington Heights. And I think they are just making sure that they can now put more full force, if anything, into the due diligence into Plan B, knowing that they might have to shift that way if nothing truly can get done in Springfield to their liking.
Yeah, I remember, Kevin, to be honest, thinking when they bought Arlington, it's a done deal. They're gone. It just made so much sense on so many levels. And I also thought, perhaps naively, that somehow, some way, the Illinois legislature, even at the 11th hour, would find some way to get this done. So for people who haven't been following along, in a nutshell, what happened?
I'm with you too on that. I thought something was going to get done on May 31st, and but the House passed the mega project bill the Bears had, been not obviously an official sponsor of, but was the type of bill they needed. It was going to offer what they call property tax certainty, and that was going to give them the ability to negotiate property taxes with the communities, and it was more of a general bill, not just for the Bears, as Governor Pritzker talked about, as a type of bill that could lure other big corporations that wanted to build in Illinois to Illinois. And then it passed the House, but when it came time for the state Senate to consider it, it fell apart quickly. I believe that was last Saturday, late afternoon, early evening. And then they came together, the state Senate, and they came up with their own bill, which pretty much matched what Indiana put forth. Indiana created this stadium authority in which the Bears would lease the stadium, that the government would own it, and no property taxes in that case. Now, there's obviously a lot of other tax situations to consider, but as you know, you've covered a lot more Springfield happenings than I have. When these things get passed late at night, the House doesn't have a whole lot of time to review it. And you could sense the frustration from the mayor of Arlington Heights. You can sense the frustration from the Chicago Bears. I mean, the state Senate has had 5 years really to think about this possibility. And if you want to make it a shorter time timeline they've had since February when Indiana put forth this. And for them to come up with that and have it filed at 11 p.m., the end of the legislative period, that's not a whole lot of time to get something passed. So, the House balked, and then, they obviously, everybody there said that they wanted to make this happen, but they just need more time. But like, it's not like they could get together today and get something done. So I think that maybe this really public push here by the Bears to continue focusing on Hammond does continue to get people back to the negotiating table and figure out what they can get done. I will say one of the things I thought might have happened, because the Bears put out a statement when that legislation didn't come through, which was they were committed to pick a location end of spring, early summer, which is right now. I, without really having sourcing on this per se, just reading the tea leaves and knowing what I know, I wondered if this was going to open the door for the Bears to say, listen, we're going to say right now, we commit to building in Illinois, and we are confident that the lawmakers will help us get this done. And it's going to take longer than we thought, but we're committed to Illinois. Obviously, they did the opposite by announcing today that they're focusing right now on development in Indiana.
Let me ask you one more question on this, Kevin, before we move on, because I don't want to spend too much time talking about the past and what happened in the legislature. But it's easy to blame lawmakers, and you could, I guess, blame Democrats as well. But there was a lot at play there. Who do you think this ultimately falls on, the fact that this deal didn't get done?
Just about everybody. Not me. I'm not to blame. But I don't see how this isn't falling on everybody. The Illinois lawmakers have known for a long time that this was going to be a possibility, that they'd have to figure out a way to get this done, and they didn't. I think if you read the reports from the folks who cover Springfield for a living, it certainly seems like the Bears either overplayed their hand, or President Kevin Warren just didn't know how to properly navigate the waters that is Springfield, Illinois, and it takes a deft hand to do so. And he, regardless of who they hired to lobby, all those different things, you see these reports from the news reporters who cover this for a living, and they say that the Bears didn't do a great job of managing that. So, and the Bears, you could go all the way back to 2021, and maybe they should have had some more political certainty on their side before they purchased the land in Arlington Heights. You can also, as I mentioned earlier, I think that the Bears deciding to spend 13 months looking to build in Chicago when they own this land in Arlington Heights, I think that set them back greatly. I understand why they did it, but I think that was a big misstep. So you can go on and on and on, but just about everybody involved, I think, has a hand in the fact that the Bears felt like their hand was forced to go ahead and call the board in to make this current commitment to Indiana. I say current because I really think that the door is still open to Illinois, and I'm not going to, there's a lot more that needs to be done right now in Indiana that needs to be done in Arlington Heights. I think that the Bears wanted to build in Arlington Heights, they could probably get going pretty quickly.
All right, so where do we stand right now then, Kevin? Because as you know, there are reports now, I saw in Cranes, I believe, that the Bears were having discussions or talks with the city of Chicago that no one knew about. And I also understand perhaps their response was that, well, we were just talking about the lease. Mayor Johnson's insertion into this whole process late in the game and his insistence that Chicago was still on the table seemed to foul up at least some of what had been, some of the progress that had been made in Springfield. So I guess A, where are we right now? And B, is Chicago still in the picture?
I don't think Chicago's in the picture at all. I don't think Chicago's been in the picture since I sat in Soldier Field and listened to them try to convince me that Chicago was in the picture, to be honest. I mean, I think that people who have studied this and followed this stuff know how difficult it would have been financially, even just with the infrastructure. I mean, the things they were talking about doing to Lakeshore Drive, it was just really hard to conceptualize. Call me a massive skeptic, but I've generally been out on the possibility of a brand new Soldier Field at the museum campus in Chicago. And I think the Bears have said as much. Now, as far as what those communications were, I don't know, but I think it does speak to a larger point that it seems like Illinois politicians were confused on what the Bears were doing. And obviously the Bears are probably playing some politics too, to keep a couple balls in the air and try to force the hand of the people they need to get the money that they're hoping for and to get the property tax certainty that they're hoping for. So, where it goes from now is it's a lot lot of it is in the how the Illinois legislature can move from here. You know, what are they able to do? Can they have an emergency summer session?
Right.
Does Governor Pritzker really, put his stamp on this and tell them to get together and get something sorted out? Obviously there's a bit of a limitation on what the Illinois politicians can do with the legislative period being over. And now what I think, I've thought this since February when the Bears first announced, or actually it was when the state of Indiana passed their bills. My understanding was that the important date would be when everything in Indiana is ready. So environmental studies are done, traffic studies are done, the infrastructure is all sorted out, everything financially and politically is all ready to go. Whenever that date is, to me, that is the big day. That is when Illinois is officially going to be out. But we're not at that day yet. I don't know when that day is. It could be next week. It could be next month. Based on the statement the Bears can put out, it doesn't sound like it's very imminent if they don't have an exact site that they're able to announce publicly. So when that day comes, whenever they could put a shovel in the ground in Indiana, that's when it really, truly, that Illinois is out.
Yeah.
The problem is that the Illinois politicians don't know when that is. I don't think the Bears know when that is, and that is going to maybe impact the timeline, and maybe the Bears just kind of hastened the timeline to allow Illinois to try to get something done. But right now, the Bears and their people are going to try to figure out something in Hammond so that they're ready to go if nothing's going to get done in Springfield.
It's interesting that you say that because you mentioned leverage, Kevin. In a statement from Bears chairman George McCaskey, he says, "We believe a world-class stadium project in Hammond will transform the region, connecting northwest Indiana to the south side of Chicago through the Loop and across neighborhoods and suburbs stretching north of the city. It will bring Chicagoland together and deliver new opportunities to its residents and businesses." I guess I'll ask, do you really think, and do you think Illinois lawmakers really think the Bears could go to Indiana?
I think they could. I say that having sat in the Hersey High School gymnasium in September 2022, watching George McCaskey lay out the plans for Arlington Heights and how excited he was to build in Arlington Heights.
Yeah.
I sat in the Soldier Field, the suites, the United Club at Soldier Field, and I watched as George McCaskey and Kevin Warren and Karen Murphy and Brandon Johnson talked about what it would mean for the Bears to build on the museum campus. I was there at the NFL owners meetings in West Palm Beach last year as George McCaskey and Kevin Warren explained how excited they are to build in Arlington Heights. On and on it goes. You see the pattern here. So it's hard until this thing is done. It's just words. But I say all that, being I don't doubt that the Bears could do this. If all the studies pass, if they get all the traffic and environmental stuff done, obviously Indiana has created a kind of a sweetheart deal for the team. They look at it, it's 20 minutes from downtown Chicago. The team would probably stay at the exact same hotel that they stay in before home games now, if they played in Hammond, Indiana. They already practice in Lake Forest. That's not going to change. That's already a hike to Soldier Field. So, and they know that there's other NFL teams that don't play, that play across state lines or play pretty far away from the name on the city. They just played in Santa Clara against the San Francisco 49ers. So I do think it's possible. But again, it's really hard for me, and I'm putting my cynic hat on, to take a lot of these statements at face value because I've heard so many of them over the past 4 or 5 years. Yeah,
it does seem like so much of it is politics, Kevin. I mean, again, who knows? Maybe I get it. And if nothing else, Hammond is a great hole card to say, well, you guys can do whatever you want, but we've got this other great option over there, which, like it or not, does put some pressure on Illinois to do something. And I think with all of the leverage that's out there and all of the, I guess, deals that are floating around, it's unrealistic to think the Bears would stay here without getting something.
Yeah, I think they would. That was, again, the kind of the almost humorous part of late Sunday night was seeing the Senate come through with this possibility of creating a stadium authority that would slash the Bears' property taxes to zero, if I understand that correctly. So, like the Bears, the McCaskey family does not have billions of dollars just sitting in their garage.
Right. It's all in the team.
This is not an ownership group. This is not the Cronkies who were able to build SoFi Stadium with their own money. And you know, this isn't, you go to Las Vegas to the Allegiant Stadium. Like, and then on the flip side, this isn't Tennessee Titans, who are getting a lot of money from the state of Tennessee. You look at the Cleveland Browns. The state of Ohio has passed language. The Bears this December will go play in the brand new Buffalo Bills Stadium. The New York State, like, they made it happen. They helped make it happen for the Bills. So the Bears need one of two things to happen. They need to be able to pay for everything themselves, or they need a state to help them. And right now, Indiana is the state that is helping them, or has the politics done. The legislation has been passed that can help them. So right now, that gives Indiana a little bit of an edge. But if those things can somehow pass in Illinois at some point before Indiana's ready to go, then I think Illinois is back in the picture.
Yeah, well, it seems like, at least on the surface, and you've touched on this, but the simple question, Kevin, is where do the Bears want to be? Because it seems like they really, to your point, want to be at Arlington Heights.
Yeah, I think all things equal, it's Arlington Heights. That it was the first place they went. It was, you got to go. Here's a fun one. You got to go back to when Matt Nagy was still the head coach. That's how long it's been since they bought the land in Arlington Heights. Matt Nagy was the head coach, and Justin Fields was the quarterback. That's 2 head coaches ago. So it's been a while, and that was the land that former President Ted Phillips sought out. There's some history there with the Hallis family, and it's a massive plot of land. It's in a good location. You got the metro station there. It's in a beautiful suburb. All those people who live in the nearby suburbs who are already season ticket holders, it's right there for them. They can build a massive entertainment district around the stadium, which is something that you've seen teams do all across sports across this country, because they're trying to find new ways to drive revenue. It just makes the most sense. Now, they could figure out a way to build a beautiful stadium and a beautiful entertainment district in Hammond, Indiana, and people would come in and still probably stay in Chicago. So, you know, the city of Chicago will still certainly get hotel revenue, restaurant revenue, and all those things. But I don't know, in terms of like foot traffic and general traffic, there's more people going past Arlington Park probably per day than would be going past the stadium site options in Hammond, based on just you think about the populations and think where those things are. So I do think that George McCaskey's number one choice would be Arlington Heights. Now, I back that up. Maybe the number one real choice is to build a time machine and do a better job renovating Soldier Field 23 years ago, 25 years ago. They wouldn't be in this situation. But a lot of NFL teams have found themselves in this spot where there's so much money at play, and it becomes like it's like an arms race for stadiums. And the Bears, I joke about this, every year, the Bears travel to 8 or 9 stadiums, and all of them pretty much are nicer than their own. And all of them, actually not all of them, most of them have other opportunities for revenue around them. So, yes, it's also hard to have this conversation when you think about how electric and amazing the atmosphere was at Soldier Field last December and January when the Bears made this playoff run. And you think, how could you not want to be here on the lake with the skyline? But the stadium itself just doesn't live up to the rest of the league. And again, the Bears don't have the opportunities to try to increase revenue. And I understand why the Bears want to do that. This is a business first and foremost. So, I think that, if they can't figure out a way to build a time machine and rebuild Soldier Field so they wouldn't have to move, then Arlington Heights, I imagine, has generally, all things equal, been the first choice. But the state of Illinois is not giving the Bears what they believe they need to make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned these other stadiums in the other states that have stepped in to help. Santa Clara, I believe, though, was not the state. I think that was Santa Clara that stepped up to help fund that. But be that as it may, I'm sure Illinois lawmakers understand the value of all that you just laid out, the entertainment district around it. You're talking about the possibility of getting Super Bowls, Final Fours. This is going to be a magnet that's going to draw a lot of not only people, but economic activity. So lawmakers know this. Clearly, Governor Pritzker knows this. Some were surprised that Governor Pritzker didn't lean into this more, and maybe you heard this because I did, that he assured Commissioner Roger Goodell that they would get this done. And in the end, they didn't. Can they, I guess, is the question. They would have to call a special session if they're going to try to keep to the Bears' timeline. Otherwise, they don't get together again until the fall.
Yeah, I think, as you said, it all depends on that special session, and it might need Governor Pritzker really to help make that happen. And you've seen all those statements come out today. Now, I think that it's an interesting tug of war for these politicians, and I get it, because you don't want to be the ones that lost the Chicago Bears to across state lines, but you also don't want to be the ones to, give away money to an entity that's worth billions and billions of dollars. In today's day and age, that is just not a very popular thing to do.
Right.
Now, the Bears would certainly argue that they're not asking for anybody, any state taxpayers to pay, but when you look at the property tax situation, someone's going to have to make up that gap if the Bears aren't paying their, quote, fair share of the property tax. The flip side of that is if the Bears aren't there, nobody's paying that property tax until they find somebody else to buy that land. So I think that, I would love to get a better understanding from the politicians who are based in Chicago, why it took to the 23rd hour for them to kind of make this push. And it just seems like it was almost as if it came out of thin air that the Bears would move to Arlington Heights if this mega projects bill passed, and these people were caught off guard. Again, they bought the land almost 5 years ago. It's been a long time for the Chicago politicians to consider this. The Bears did their due diligence. They tried to make it happen on the museum campus. As much of a fool's errand as I think that was, they tried, and it didn't work. And
there are a lot of challenges
reason,
there. As much as I'd love to see them in Chicago, there are a lot of issues on that museum campus.
Yeah, it would have been great. And you looked at the renderings that day, and it looked beautiful. And you thought about all the green space they were creating for just general population. You think about just the youth in the Chicago area to give them another place to spend their time. It all looked great. And I sit in that press box. I'm very fortunate to be able to have that seat. And I see that beautiful Chicago skyline every Bears home game, and you pinch yourself. Like, this is so fun. And when the team is good and the stadium is rocking and you see it on national TV and the cameras going around, like, it's a really special place for a stadium. But what they need to do to update that stadium and to update the infrastructure around it just seemed so impossible when you think about all the finances they would need to make that happen. And look, Arlington Heights, I think they could build a pretty impressive stadium, have a beautiful surrounding area. You've got the Metro right there. Most people would probably stay in downtown Chicago still. So I get it. But look, I will absolutely understand whenever this happens, why it will be sad to see the team leave just a beautiful, beautiful spot in downtown Chicago.
Well, attitudes have changed about paying for stadiums, Kevin. I don't need to tell you that. People just don't have the appetite for it anymore. And I guess it's just a different political climate when it comes to this, especially when the state is in the financial situation that it's in. And I think there's very little consensus in politics today, but I think the consensus seemed to be, don't let the Bears leave, but don't give them any money.
Yeah, and I totally get it. I get why politicians are in this kind of pickle. What you notice is the politicians whose areas are around, whether it's Rolling Meadows or Arlington Heights, that are kind of near where the stadium would be built, they're obviously very sort of supportive, and they think about the construction jobs and the revenue and the people that are going to be wanting to come into their neighborhood. And then you think about the city of Chicago. They don't want to lose their stadium. They don't want to lose that. The people that they're coming through Soldier Field, 10 plus times a year when home games are there too. So, the Bears worked really hard with this mega projects bill to create a situation in which, they, since day one, they have said they will pay for the stadium. They've committed $2 billion to build the stadium. And they really believe this mega projects bill was the way to do it, where they're going to pay a fair property tax when they compare it to other professional sports teams in their stadiums. But you can also look around and say that when you are worth what they are worth, and you have that kind of land, and property taxes are going up, who's going to make up for that? And sometimes it ends up being the taxpayers. Now, obviously, I don't understand how that all works out. I try to write about football as more so than economics, but we've all had to try to understand this stuff over the past few years, and the Bears really believed it. And look, the Illinois House believed in it too. They passed it.
Yeah.
And if the state Senate had an appetite for it and they had passed it, we wouldn't be having this conversation. They wouldn't have had to put out the statement about Hammond, and shoot, maybe there'd be shovels in the ground in Arlington Park today. If the state Senate was able to pass that. But obviously there's a lot of reasons why they didn't, and I think the Bears can kind of blame themselves a little bit. They won't, but they certainly could, and the state legislators can blame themselves as well.
All right, before we let you go, Kevin, a few questions just to put a pin in some of these things we've been talking about. The Bears lease at Soldier Field goes through 2033, is that right?
Correct.
All right, so here's question number one. Will they play at Soldier Field past that lease?
Wow, that's a great question. Now, there is an out in that lease. I believe it's 2020. Gosh, it's been so long since they finally purchased the Arlington Park property, and I had to know all this information. So here, 2027, 28, 29, one of the next 3 years, there's an out with a penalty to leaving the lease. Which, when they purchased land in 2021, that was the target year we were kind of all looking at. That is kind of out now because it's going to take a few years to build the stadium when they finally get to a place where they can. I think at this point they might run out that, they might go ahead and just finish out the lease through 2033, depending on how long it takes to build the stadium, because not just the stadium, it's obviously going to be everything around it. And then you've got, again, the traffic patterns and figuring out the public transportation. So yeah, today, man, if you asked me in June 2021, or I guess it was September 2021, when the news first leaked that they were going to purchase at Arlington Park, I wouldn't have believed we'd be having this conversation today, and I certainly wouldn't have expected them to go through 2033. But right now, I mean, that's certainly an option, and maybe a likely one.
All right, you touched on this earlier, but just to, again, circle back, when do you think we know?
Well, I think the next probably 3 weeks might be important. NFL teams like to create somewhat arbitrary deadlines sometimes. So let's say July 1st might be the type of day that the Bears create, the Illinois State Legislature creates. I don't know if that's a date, but now that they can move forward in Indiana and start to get the studies done they need to get done, maybe that's a date they give. Because the other thing too is, like, the Bears have a football season that they got to play. Now, that doesn't get in the way of all this stuff. They've been doing this, they could do 2 things at once. But certainly I would imagine they'd love to really know all this stuff and not have to send open letters in the middle of a football season about their stadium, like they had to do a couple times last year. So I think that today's news, you always hear that line, deadline spur action. I don't know what the deadline is, but I would imagine that there has to be something in Springfield that these people realize, hey, we're in a race against the clock. We don't know how much time is left on that clock, but the clock can run out any day. And so maybe by the end of the month we could get a little bit more clarity. But as I said, this has been going on a long time. This is now the 4th different switch the Bears have made when it comes to their intent on where to build. So anything somebody suggests, I'll nod along and say, yeah, that could happen.
So you think this will poke Illinois lawmakers enough to get something done in the next 3 weeks, which, as we've said, will require a special session?
I think that they have to realize that this is possible, that this is very possible. And like, it just, if it's true that the Illinois House just needed more time to sit with that bill that the state Senate passed late last Sunday night, then do it. Then sit with that bill and figure something out, is probably the messaging from the people that want this team to stay. That to me makes sense for them to come together. Again, I can't fathom how I understand it's kind of normal, but it's still, again, me being a football writer, it's hard for me to understand how a government entity can just be off from May to November, and that you need to call an emergency session to get this stuff done. But if that's what it takes, yeah, I think that today's statement, and as you've seen from some of the state representatives, Kevin Warren's been having conversations with them too, so they know more than I do, certainly, about maybe Kevin Warren has been able to give them a better sense of the timeline. They can give that to their compadres there in Springfield and come together and find time, because I think that's what it's going to need. They're going to need to come up with an emergency session or some kind of promise. I don't know what it would take for the Bears to kind of flip back and say, okay, we trust you. Again, I thought that might have been an option for the Bears to just say, okay, we think enough progress was made in Springfield that we're confident this can happen and we're going to commit to building here. That did not happen last week. And it really rattled the Bears to a point where they are today. So I think that the legislators probably do have to get together.
Yeah. The other thing we've established here, I guess, in your opinion, Chicago's out.
I do believe Chicago's out. Okay. If there is a way that they can figure it out, I know they talked about using the Illinois Sports Authority, which they've talked about. But I've also heard politicians say, the White Sox have been talking, the Chicago Fire are building a stadium. The Cubs ran into this a few years ago, and the Ricketts, and they paid for it themselves. So there's other teams in town. The Bulls are doing some work, obviously, the United Center neighborhood.
Right,
so
1901 project.
I think that it'd be great if they can make it work in the city. But as of right now, I really have not seen anything that's convinced me that can happen.
All right. So what is it called? The poly markets, or what is it where you can bet on certain things happening? Is that what that is? I forget what it's called. But if you had to put your mortgage on where the Bears end up, what would you say?
Gosh, you're asking me to come up to a roulette wheel here, like, red or black. Look, I still think this thing finds a way back to Arlington Heights. I don't know how. I don't know when. Maybe I'm being stubborn, and I'm still thinking about having to sit in Hersey High School and listen to that entire presentation, nearly 4 years ago. But I just feel like somehow this finds its way back there. Right now, it feels like an underdog. If you're a betting person, you probably get good value on Arlington Heights if you wanted to bet it today. But I will say this: Indiana is the favorite. I think it is stepped ahead as the favorite right now. But I'm being stubborn, and I still think this thing finds a way back to Arlington Heights.
I think you're being stubborn and hopeful. Fair enough.
I mean, listen, it'd be an easier commute for me, but the way this world is, like, I will be lucky to still be covering the Bears whenever this new stadium is built. I'd be thrilled to go cover them wherever they're playing. And if I got to drive an extra 15 minutes past Soldier Field to head to Hammond, Indiana, so be it. I love what I get to do, but I wouldn't be lying if I said, the Arlington Heights is a little bit more convenient for everybody who lives north of the Chicago area.
Yeah. Well, one thing's for sure, you're going to get to enjoy your Northwestern Wildcat football team at a brand new stadium this fall. So good luck with that. Kevin Fishbain is his name. He's a senior writer with The Athletic. Kevin, thanks so much for your time and your insight. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's our conversation with Kevin Fishbain about the news today that the Chicago Bears have announced that their board of directors just took a vote and decided that in that vote they were going to pursue what their options were in Hammond, Indiana. Much more on this story coming up tonight on CBS News Chicago at 4, 5, and 6. For now, I'm Joe Donlin. We'll see you soon.
This has been breaking news from CBS News Chicago.